The very last score in our selection of Brev level entries from the Orchestration Online Patreon group of supporters is from Thibault, and this is such a fun score. I mean, this is delicatissimo all the way through, and just really wonderfully balanced. I'll discuss more about what works than about what doesn't, right? But because there's very little that doesn't quite work. There are just neat little elements. What I love about this kind of orchestration is the restraint, right? The sense of not having to do too much. So that means that you can get away with a lot by doing very little. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that it isn't richly orchestrated. It's very richly orchestrated. It's just that it's orchestrated more for its subtlety, right? Rather than for its, its more obvious possibilities, right? There isn't so much of a pressure to have an edge to the music or to be triumphant or huge or immense, except for when it's absolutely needed. So that makes this a very strong score in its own unique way. I'm looking at just the way that the beginning is set up, and we see some familiar elements here, trading off between first and second players in terms of these patterns. We're seeing punctuation on the baton strokes. That is also pretty cool with, like, say, oboe and doubling with pizzicato. Then English horn comes in as well, playing that perfect fourth right in there. And now we just have this just wonderful, like, opening up. It's like a little flower opening up here with the harp just kind of pushing to where it should be, almost like a little waltz or gymnopédie by Satie. We got this boom ching da da dum, and then that goes back and forth between different instruments. It's really the accompaniment here that has the most effect, because we've seen this before, right? And Thibault, I would say you don't really need to mark. I don't think you need to come up to mezzo piano. I think all you have to do is just say solo. Do you know what I mean? Or yeah, I don't think that you need to go to mezzo piano there. So anyways, you have this boom ching, and then you've got pluck, right? With a little bit of triangle on the top, and that is wonderful. Kind of harking back to the beginning here, this one little triangle stroke was so effective because it just lightened up the color for everything as the second bar started, and now it's back here. And then this didn't quite come through in the mock-up, and that is harp plucking along with cello, and then a rolled celesta chord, which is sounding an octave higher, right? Somehow it didn't quite come through. But it doesn't mean that it wouldn't in concert. Here we're trading off to a first clarinet, right? And doubling at an octave below the first flute, right? And here is where I would actually trade off, right? I'd start with second, first, second, ending here, and then first taking over on the melody, or just first starting here. Just so that the first is just completely ready, primed and ready to go, and just plays right into the melody there. Now we've got our little scrubbing part, and this is done, fairly subtly. Just firsts and violas in octaves, pushing into this these trills, gradually joined by flute and clarinet. And then those same trills as well. A2 on most of these instruments. And we've got just that bit of roll on the timpani going down to a single triangle stroke here, and then celesta going kind of ting there. And then celesta coming in and playing in octaves, basically playing like the doubling right here. This is going to sound an octave higher, and then this right here will double the oboe, right? The A2 oboes, which I would say here, you might want to go down to single instruments here if they're going to carry this and be really exposed like this. It's just completely naked. There's like no help from the string. So I would say just like solo players here or single players here. And then of course this is playing an octave below the left hand of the celesta. So that's going to be just very gleaming, right? In the mock-up, it just really kind of sounded more like kind of jangling in the background. But so long as these players like go back down to like around piano, then this will be heard very beautifully. And ending with just a little ting by the glockenspiel. All right, and then we're back to the strings this time, middle strings, seconds, and violas, and just a touch of this above. Notice that this kind of following of the melody line in other instruments, just kind of breaking it down into its own melody, has been done, behind other doublings, and here it's done over it. And of course this is going to somewhat, if this stays A2, it'll be heard pretty clearly. If it doesn't, it might get a little swallowed by the resonance of the strings, but I think that that's probably what you would want there. And then this will be a lot clearer, the clarinets over, an octave above the bassoons, which are being doubled by the violas. Right, and then this is sort of going to merge into the second violins here. So this is all just very charming. When you add the celesta to it, it's just going to sound adorable. And that just sort of eases off. We've got like right here, I would say A2 horns and then bassoons below. That doesn't really balance. I would say one horn and A2 bassoons, or just have it all horns or all bassoons, right? But this will not really be all that balanced. You do have the tremolo behind it, right? But I would say just you want a cohesive sound that is just as cohesive as the strings here, right? So I would say two of the same instrument or more balanced, right? But A2 is just putting so much more weight on the horns than it is on the bassoons, right? So I would say A2 bassoons, one horn would probably work a whole lot better there. From rehearsal mark A, we have more very tasteful work for the harp. And this is just, perfect harp scoring. Little touches, filigree, decoration, emphasizing certain things, right? It's rather than just being a big harp concerto where the harp plays all the melodies and all the left hand and everything from the piano part. This is like the opposite of that. This is just really good harp scoring and giving the harpist plenty of time to change their pedal when they need to, right? And also this beautiful idea of downwards glissando. Usually like downwards glissando is used when the harp is going up and down and up and down, right? That's generally when you see it, but you rarely see it to emphasize the beginning of a phrase like this, and I think that just works beautifully. And then here we got the roll, and then the downward, just kind of another downward gesture here. And then these two little bits of emphasis on the baton stroke right there. That's really great. So how does it all fit together? Well, what's nice about it is that there is enough kind of randomization and trading off of parts here and there that it just kind of keeps the sound rippling throughout the orchestra without being necessarily too tortuous, right? So it breaking it up between these two sets of instruments allows the viola to cover the higher notes and the cellos like sort of playing over the tenor register of the cello, and then the cello takes over and plays the lower notes in its right over its most characteristic range, and it keeps everything really really comfortable between the two parts and very playable. I think so. So it's just a nice way to do that kind of rippling left hand through the strings without wearing out any one particular player. And of course, there's bassoons are just going to do what they do. This might be a good place to divide up the bassoons, like have the first player do this and the second player do that phrase, right? Just maybe, possibly. And this is all pretty doable. I think that you need to continue to keep in mind, like the first screen was very much, you really worked out who was playing first and second and so on. And then from here on, not quite as careful, right? But try to continue to do it. It's really good discipline, right? Like, who is this player? Is this the first, the second? Is it A2? What, right? That tells me as the person evaluating your score where the strengths are, right? But there's all these other neat touches. You've got this sort of triple octave here, or quadruple octave. You got flute stacked with so you've got flute supported by celesta, and then an octave below that you've got the first violins, and then 2 octaves below that you've got the bassoon, kind of not really supported. Really is becoming almost a bit of a bass line following the melody. And nice trading off of different voices, like going from the flutes to the English horn and clarinet, sort of middle winds, as it were, still following the parts here in the strings. So that all works just really great. Kind of works into the sort of flurry of notes and sounds and so on. And I mean, it's hard to maintain for too long, right? You're just trading back to the same functions as before with different melody instruments this time, oboe and English horn in octaves, which is always a neat touch. A very pungent type of sound, and then splitting off here, flute and oboe, just like it did before, on the very last 3 notes, with a little bit of glock on top. So it's all very charming and cute and stuff, and that little bit of celesta doesn't hurt either. Right, and then we're getting into these little 2 bars that sort of set up the big push right at the end. And this is, once again, done pretty well, I would say. I like the staccato from the oboes, doubling pizzicato, and then the other wind instruments reacting to it. That's pretty good. And then like the instruments that come in at the beginning finish up, right? And you do something similar here, right? The harp doubling with the clarinets, and then clarinet plus bass clarinet, right? Alternating or sort of bookending this bar with the oboes taking over that little bit of theme. And then the strings coming in here, and this just all feels really organic from that point on. Okay, now here we're getting into some concertoistic kind of scoring for the strings. And not to say that the strings can't play any of this stuff if they have a reason to. I think you're giving them more of a reason to than I've seen in other scores, just in terms of like the way that the technique is set up for the the whole piece. It just seems more appropriate the way that it's being scored here, but still caution, 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 right? How long can the players maintain certain types of bowing, certain types of patterns? How much breathing can they do? Always be thinking of that, for your wins. And same thing for strings, like when you have one of these arpeggiated passages that just really swoops over a big line of notes and then puts the fingers into like one of these positions, right? Now, how well can that be done? How far up are you going to push your players, right? And everything like that. So this just still is a big concern, right, for this section. I wouldn't let anybody off the hook for that, right? Despite how much you're using more of an orchestral approach of, say, Ravel in his orchestration of Bark on the Ocean, right? That seems to be where you headed, especially with the next page, where you see some of that same scoring here, really very reminiscent of a Bark on the Ocean, just where the instruments sort of swoop up here, and then they're answered coming down by the other divisi group. We've got the tremolo and so on, pizzicato, very, just taking a page out of that orchestration study that I did, I think a couple of years ago. And just really lovely textural stuff, though. The pizzicato, the trills. You're taking time to point out that it's a double stop, like you are trilling up to, not a double stop, into a double flat. And this is a little bit more reasonable. This kind of, like scoring for harp, clarinets and oboes. It's, but this, man, just asking for this high note, that just, it's hard enough on my poor old eyes to read such small notes, but that is just out of bounds right there. You're asking for the player to go up to a high B flat, and there are very few oboists alive who could just pop that B flat out just like it was nothing. It's already, just playing this little casual phrase right here, or beam group, and going up to the F and still being soft and controlled and everything. That's, it's not incredibly difficult, but it still is a lot to think about. But wow, hitting that really high note up there, that's, so, gosh, my poor eyes, I just can barely read the, how many ledger lines that is. I'm really sorry here, so, so that just feels way high there. I'm sorry. So that is a G up there. Sorry, not a B flat. It's just really, really small. My eyes are not as good as they used to be. All right, so even going up to G though, I wouldn't just count on that, right? I mean, I wouldn't pull that out unless you're really giving your player a reason to. Sorry, I thought that was B flat. It's just so small. Okay. But it's like, if there was a way to work in some other instrument, I mean, you are, like, if there's a way to, like, have the piccolo play it, or, I mean, is there some other way of doing this, or just leaving it out, maybe an octave lower? So, yeah. Okay. But yeah, but beautiful, very beautiful Ravel-like scoring right in this whole page, and it's, it mostly works fine, right? I'm still not sure. I mean, you've got a lot of A2 scoring, for these very soft lines in now you're going A4, right? And so it still has a lot of projection, right? When you put that many players on a single pitch, really cute too to have the very very high. Sorry, I don't mean to be condescending at all when I say cute. I mean it's just really, it has a charming effect, right? But high roll on the timpani just really has a very stressful. Actually, it's a slight stressor, right? When you've got very high timpani rolls, and it makes me feel just really that like the way that this is going to tail off is not going to be quite as elegant as you might suspect. If there were some way of doubling this with, say, tremolo from one of your cellos, and then just tapering it off down to very, very soft in the cello as this kind of evens itself out, then it would disappear a lot more, just a lot more effortlessly back into the texture, right? Because this is really decreasing otherwise, like it's really beautifully telescoping itself down, and it's pretty nicely orchestrated. This is a nice example of very good textural scoring, very well proportioned, right? But I'm just not too sure about, because it's a very stressful sound, right? So if you maybe had marked, I'd say make sure that the destination is like pianissimo, right? And then maybe even just like you could have like viola, like that's within the viola range. Just have your second divisi violas trilling on the same, sorry, not trilling, tremolo on the same exact note, and then just continue to tremolo a little bit later, right? So that the tone just all sort of just phases out a lot more evenly, right? And the same thing here is you really got to mark your destination dynamics, right? Down to, I would say, just mark the end of all of these diminuendo marks should all be like pianissimo or triple P or whatever. Just like, I mean, especially like this big tuba note down here, that is going to be really strong, right? And it should be the opposite, right? The tuba note should disappear into the double bass note, which should then disappear into nothing, right? Rather than the other way around, right? Because like then the string ends early and then the tuba goes on, and then it's really obvious when it stops because tuba has such a strong projection, right? So it's better to blend the one that can disappear the easiest. Sorry, blend the one that has more trouble fading out into the one that can disappear more easily, right? And same thing here. Just like these trumpet chords are fine, but just make sure that you are proportionally fading them out so that you have a real effortless effect when you get to here. I really love, by the way that you are paying attention to the flexing of the tempo for the best effect, right? Molto ritardando. It's exactly perfect, right? We just need to follow the clues that are put in the music, all right? But just, great. This is all just really great scoring, and I think it's really nice. I mean, wow, that is going to be some big punchy melodic stuff happening in there. But it's good because there's like not a ton of support, right? There's some strings in there, and there's some oboe. This is going to blast the oboe just right out of existence. So, unless this oboe is forte and these guys are mezzo piano, it's going to be really strong. Now, for the B section, I'm going to just make a few observations here before we really plow into it. I think that you need to be very careful in 9/8 scoring, scoring like this. Eighth rest followed by four, four quarter notes in a row. I think you need to do this. Like, see, this is much better. Just make this into a tie, right? Right. I mean, that's That's really what the conductor is going to need to see. He needs to know where the beat falls, right? And this just becomes very confusing, the way that it's all laid out, right? So this should, right in here, this needs to be a tied eighth note, right? Which lines up with this right here. So it's just a lot clearer that way. And it's easier on me as a score reader too. I like a lot of the way that this works in here. These, this descending oboe, the way that the flutes come in here, and then the flute takes over the melody line, and then the oboe going to the flute again, an octave higher. It's going to be hard to play piano right there. This is really, you're talking about like piccolo being able to play piano up there, right? And then maybe have the flute come in right here and just branch off into the piccolo, is if you really need that line way up there and you need it to be so soft, right? Just wonderful touches from Celesta, this little harp right there, and then this roll. And I just love the way that you don't just have harp take over on the left hand all over the place, but you dole it out. Harp plus bass clarinet is always a cool combination. I think I did that myself in a few pieces. Bassoon on, bassoon's A2 here. Then we've got like the bass clarinet and bassoon plus harp plus cellos, coming up to these divisi tremolos, and yeah, just all just has wonderful little elements of texture. So I don't really have a whole lot to take issue with in there. I think it's all pretty clearly and cleanly stated. I think that there are some expectations here of, like, what the sound of the brass is, that maybe you could work on a little bit, just in terms of like what are they capable of dynamically and so on and so forth. Like, here you're pushing up to this forte on the A flat, and that's going to make sense. Mezzo piano to forte on the A flat, and then coming back down again to P. This is still going to stand way out of the texture. It's not going to necessarily blend in with everything else that's going on behind it, especially with everything else marked mezzo forte, right? I mean, if you really want the horns to stand out, that's the way that you've scored it, right? Whereas this is much more feasible. I wouldn't do a mezzo piano to mezzo forte crescendo. I would do piano to mezzo forte, right? And then this has to have some destination where you headed, P, right? So that's got to be in there too. But yeah, very cool timpani scoring, and just like adding some of that pulse to it, and also just the effect of the timpani roll. So yeah, just not a whole lot to take issue in here. This is really great, the way things start to build up, and just adding some Glock in there just to really get the overtones more than anything else. This is more of a clarinet thing than it is a bassoon. Like, a lot of people are scoring these kind of higher alternating, wide alternating intervals on bassoon, and it's not the most ideal thing. It's more of a clarinet thing. And that takes us to this part right here. Also pretty well done. A lot of kind of doubling, but that's all right, because it's like basically just kind of supporting this. I mean, I think you could have added maybe an octave under that, or like made, maybe more closely doubled what was going on, with the trombones and your lower winds a bit more, so that there's like maybe more of an octave happening here in the cellos instead of just like one single line. And like, when in doubt, fill in, like just add this so it's doubling up, right? But it's still nicely done, and I like the way that you bring the energy down here, just so that you can push farther and harder right here, right? That's good. Then we've got our little Borodin quote here, kind of. And this was really nice, just like building up to this and swooping up and just smacking us in the forehead. with this, with this climax here, and then just jetting back downwards. That was all done. You've got to know that if you have A4 horns on a high E flat, that is going to stand out. It's just is going to sit there. So I think that is what you want. But like, if you do, then why is the harp in here? Because nobody's going to hear it, right? Nobody's going to hear that harp until you get to right around here. So there's a couple of things. Not as completely thought out, but still pretty good. Now see here, this is great. Like the clarinets can do this stuff all day, right? And that's pretty doable too. It's like gonna need a pretty good bass clarinet player to really get that perfectly, elegantly, wonderfully exposed just like that. But good doubling opportunity for the harp. So I mean, it's a cool score, and you supplied more and more of it, but we're just doing Brev evaluation, so I'm going to stop here at letter C and just thank you so much, Thibault, for another great score. It's always great to get stuff from you, and you've been a really strong supporter of Orchestration Online for quite a while, and that's hugely appreciated. And you have great suggestions. We've had some pretty good conversations online, and I just really do appreciate that kind of active participant in the Orchestration Online community, and also supporting. It's just that is just so awesome. I want to thank you for that, and thank all of our supporters for their for helping make this whole set of challenges possible. So, but at this point, I have evaluated all the website evaluations, and I'll be uploading the last of the website evaluations around the same time I release these. And I have done all of the minim, semi-brev, and brev evaluations, and all that is left are the 10 complete full-length interpretations of the Seamstress, and that will be coming up over as we get closer and closer to the end of this week. So thanks very much, everybody, and I will see you very soon with more evaluations.